Okay, it is that time, and I did get to speak to these fabulous people here, and they wanted me to tell you that this is going to be the best panel presentation of the entire day. So we're going to round it out.
By far the best.
By far, actually. Sorry, I missed that part. So like I mentioned earlier, this panel discussion is all about navigating SaaS growth journey. So please join me in welcoming the seasoned founders, CEOs, and industry experts. They are going to be breaking down everything for you. And Kris Beck, who is the CEO of Proformex, she'll be moderating this panel. With 2 decades of experience scaling high-growth SaaS companies, Kris brings expertise in building enterprises, software, and guiding teams in both venture and growth-backed startups. So you are certainly in good hands. Kris, take it away.
Thank you. There we go. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. We are super excited to have you at this session, and I promise it will be a lively and insightful event. Whether you're looking for tips on go-to-market strategies, scaling your operations, or building teams, you're in the right place. Our panelists are super excited to share their experience with you, so without further ado, I'll introduce them. John Opdycke, from operating partner of Francisco Partners. Julie Maurer, the president of SilverLine Consulting. Bill Priemer, the former president and CEO of Hyland Software, and Kris Snyder, chief revenue officer at 90. So thank you. All right, we'll dive right into our first topic, scaling operations. Kris, you have led multiple startups from early stage to the growth cycle. What do you see as the critical milestones to consider when building a business from survival to stewardship?
I'd like to defer this question to Bill. Sorry, we actually decided we were going to have fun with this, so that was my attempt. So one more time, Kris, what's the question? I was so focused on being funny, it probably didn't land.
That's right. Critical milestones to consider when building a business from survivalship to stewardship.
Yeah, so the theory is that there's 5 stages of business building, right? And so for those of you that understand Maslow's hierarchy of need, to kind of go into the triangle, right? There's survival, and then you get from here to here to here, all the way to like you're transitioning and all that. So the same thing with business. Well, you start off and you're in survival mode, right? You have an idea, you have a plan, you get out there, you're thinking about payroll every day. Then you get into sustainable from survival, and now I can actually start to think about like, boy, I can add more people to the business. Maybe you got 10 employees or less. Then I start to get into the scale moment, and I'm starting to understand the way in which I invest in the business. Maybe it's even an investable business in scale. And then I start to get into success, where now people are showing up who want to invest in the business because they can see the value that I'm creating and that I'm building, all the way into stewardship, which is really where Bill went from the Hyland side, right, all the way to being the chairman. And that business now is really successful, right? Like all the economics are understood inside that business. We know what the cost of acquisition and capture, lifetime value, it's all there for us. So we go all the way back to that, and we go, well, this journey along the way, we have to give ourselves space and grace as we come through those different steps. We also need to understand how we approach investors, and we have to be honest with ourselves and those people that we're talking to that would like to invest in the business. And sometimes we feel like we're selling the future beyond what we know, which is okay, right? Because they need to believe as we believe, and they have to understand how we're going to behave with the capital that they give us, right? But we figure out those core economics that we can get people to anchor into to go, if I do these things, these economics will yield more users, more MRR, more ARR, all the way through the entire equation. But we've broken this down, and we're championing this into the SaaS community, these 5 stages of development and the different metrics that fall on the stage. And there's a 20 questionnaire if you ever want to decide like what stage you're in.
Very cool. Anything to add from the panelists? No? Okay.
When the crowd goes wild.
Yeah, exactly. So, Bill, you've obviously seen scaling through the early days to stewardship, as Kris mentioned. How do you think about scaling operations, particularly early on?
Yeah, once you get to the stage where you've demonstrated product viability, right? So the product is out there, it's working for customers, it's providing value, it's got some differentiation to it. It's not just a product; it's got to be the product, the support, the training, right, to make it usable. So we're talking about, from that point, how are we going to start scaling? Leadership is just really important, right? So you start off, and we're all wearing multiple hats And then you're starting to segment roles, have more defined responsibilities. And the leaders of all of those functions that are going to build teams underneath them, they've got to be experienced, knowledgeable professionals at that craft. And you have to find them and find people with, I believe, with sort of demonstrated success at doing that at that stage, because they're the ones that are going to teach the teams that they're building, those initial teams, on how to do that work. And sometimes the multi-hatted folks aren't the people aren't the leaders that you're going to need for that next stage. They were great doers. Now they need to be team builders. The most important thing then at this stage that you've got to be doing, again, you've got a viable product, is customer acquisition and customer retention. I mean, you can argue that that's the most important thing at any stage. If you're in a B2B type setting like we were, that customer acquisition is often going to involve a sales team. And so, that is, your sales team, that's, what quota can they drive? What can they typically attain? How long is it going to take them to ramp up? How many are going to wash out that you're going to have to replace? So really that headcount plan will drive your sales plan, which will drive your revenue plan. So it's really important, along with our kind of annual budgets, to have an annual headcount plan. And that headcount plan for the sales team is especially important. I think most teams, all companies, wait too long to start building their renewals function, because those recurring customers are so vital that attrition will just kill you. And even on the product side, I think the product team has to be has to prioritize their work according to what is preventing us from getting new customers, what is causing customers to leave us, and addressing those. So even on the product side, very customer acquisition and customer retention focused at the beginning of the scaling stage.
Very good.
Kris, can I just add one thing real quick? So cost of capital for an early stage SaaS company, it's a big deal, right? And so often you'll have an annual contract, and I'll give 10% off. I'll give some percentage off if you give me your money, right? But if your value proposition is thick and it's heavy, right, and the recurring is happening every month anyways, one of the things we tried at 90, and this is maybe 3 years ago, my position to the leadership team was, what if we didn't? What if we stopped? We'd still offer annual contracts. Well, they can still do for 12 months because it's easier for them to do it. But what if we didn't give them the discount anymore to do that? I still got the capital up front, but I don't give them the discount anymore. And right, 25% of our customers were taking advantage of an annual contract at an earlier stage company. That's pretty hard because I'm giving up 10%, right? I'm getting the capital. And so what we found was 15% still gave us the money without a discount. And to this day, they do. Right, so it's also okay as you think about those things in the product as you come through it, and the renewals, the retention. Don't just follow the norm, because maybe you have something that's different, and you don't have to follow that just because it's in the market.
That's a good point. Very good point. John, your role as an operating partner at a PE firm exposes you to many different companies. How do you think founders should approach incorporating data-driven decisions? So Bill's hitting on that from a sales perspective, or a service perspective on the product side too, as the company grows.
Sure. I'm a marketing guy, right? So data always gets us in trouble. So I stay away from it. No. So one of the things that we see, particularly from the founder-led companies that we invest in, and it's something that happens along their journey, is that we tend to have our gut feel first, and we tend to go with that gut, and we don't have much data, right? I used to have a mentor who would say facts are our friends, and I think that means the same thing applies to data. It is your friend. If your data set is small, you need to be careful with your data set. As your data set grows, you need to be careful with your gut. And so we really emphasize that as you are scaling and your data sets are growing and you're paying attention to that data, we need to stop walking into opportunities that we feel good about, though the data tells us something different. And as your data set gets to be as big as it is at a Hyland Software or any company of scale, and it doesn't take that long, right? I mean, the end number gets big pretty quickly if you're having some success. You really have to be trusting the data set over your gut. That's one of the biggest challenges we have with founders who are still believing in something that we've gotten past through data, and it typically is something we usually have to work through that with them. But data it rules the world in the world I work in. Sometimes to our detriment because we get wrapped around the axle on it, but generally, if you're being smart about it, and another mentor used to say, intellectually honest about what it's telling you, you tend to make pretty good decisions.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it, especially on the marketing side when we always we always want
Usually
to
cuts our budget when we spend too much time
the
looking
data.
at
Or are we
that.
telling the data what it wants?
Yeah.
So, all right, let's shift the discussion a little bit to talent. We all know how important it is attracting and retaining talent to any growing business, and the founders need to be intentional as they build their teams. So, Julie, you've worked with dozens of companies over the years. What do you see are the most effective strategies for attracting and retaining talent, especially in a competitive market and early stage?
Okay, so there's lots of strategies and there's lots of ways. So, I mean, how do I boil this down into a couple of minutes? But the things that came to mind, I'm going to talk about a couple thoughts on the attraction side and a couple of thoughts on the retention side. On the attraction side, you probably don't have all the cash to be throwing at candidates when you're in startup mode. Even if you've just had a big raise, you're thinking about how to judiciously use that money. So what I always say when we're getting ready to kick off a recruiting need with a client is we need a really compelling story. That's true, right? We're not going to make anything up, but you need to go to the candidate market, no matter how difficult the market is or how soft the market is at any given time, with a compelling story. I mean, as long as people are interested in talking to you, then that's half of the battle. You also need a compelling culture. And I mean, culture wins in this case all the time over cash. And I mean, I'm sure from Hyland Software, I mean, they can give you example of that after example of the things that they did in the earlier days to get people to work and stay there. And it's being really intentional about it, which Bill's going to talk about in a few minutes, and also sticking to it and hiring to it. And then you can talk about it, whether it's flexibility or the ability to work from home or whatever it might be. Your culture is really important. The last thing I'm going to say, and again, this is in no way all the ideas, but I would say cautiously lean into referrals and friends and family. So referrals are the greatest source of hires. They are. They perform better. They stay longer. All the data's out there. But I can tell you firsthand that there have been countless times where a founder is trying to figure out how to get rid of their board member's uncle's best friend's cousin because they are acting like an idiot. Fill in any other word other than idiot that you would like in the company. So I would just say be cautious when you're thinking about those things. And then on retention, two things came to my mind, on keeping people. One is make sure they know about what their work is doing for the organization. Make sure it's really clear to them their impact and how important their impact is. And then on retention, this might not sound like it's directly linked to retention, but fire fast if you have a bad egg. If you've hired someone and they're not a culture fit, and you know it and you smell it and you see it, everyone else does too, and they are watching you if you are the leader. So the quicker you can say, I'm not putting up with whatever it is, an idiot, fill in the word, in my business, the more respect you're going to gain from the people that do belong there. So that's my 2 cents for today.
Very good. Very
So
good.
go,
advice.
go fire everyone.
Anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think that there's Winston Churchill at some point said that give me 3 minutes, I'm going to talk for 3 hours. Give me 3 hours, I can talk for 3 minutes. And if you're going to define the vision for the company and your I have a dream speech, not your I have a plan speech to get people excited about it, as a visionary, as a founder inside that business, you should be able to do that in 3 minutes. And when you deliver that to me, I should understand that I'm not going to work for the paycheck, but I'm going to work for the purpose of the organization. Because at the early stage, you are competing with the Hylands. You are you're looking for the brilliant folks that will change what you're trying to do. But if you can't do that speech in 3 minutes and have that person go, you got a kid, you're kidding me. Tell me more, Bill. That's amazing. I want to be part of that because I'll work for the purpose and not the paycheck the same way. Right? And so often we have founders that will give me 3 hours, I can talk about this. It's like, yeah, but that doesn't land the same way. Right? So understand the intentionality around as being a founder and a CEO inside this moment, that's your moment. Right? Own it and go deliver that. I have a purpose, not I have a plan.
I didn't get the chance to, well, I wouldn't interview everybody that we hired at Hyland, but I would get in front of everyone we hired at Hyland during their first week. And, those classes got, those rooms got bigger and bigger, but that's what I was doing. So we were very intentional about crafting and being able to articulate our mission, which was our purpose, our vision, where we were going, what we intended to accomplish, and our values. The values was the underpinning of that culture. It's what we believed, it was the bedrock of how we treated each other, how we approached our work, and how we worked with our customers. But they needed to hear it from me right when they came in, so they knew this was how we operate. And it was it was very important for me personally to be maybe not the first one, but definitely the definitive one that defined Hyland, its culture, what we're all about, what we were intending to accomplish.
And you had a slide.
And we had a slide.
That was a great
Fun,
slide.
Super
Yeah,
fun,
yeah.
yeah.
It was fun.
Yeah.
Bill,
It's all about efficiency. Top to bottom, as quickly as possible.
was there anything else on the inflection points at Hyland that you felt like, you were there from early stage to, I think Hyland's got almost 4,000 employees globally now, that you think about reinforcing to the team here today?
Well, that was it. Well, that word that you used, reinforced. So once we had what was going to reinforce the behaviors that we wanted to emulate and reward and recognize and celebrate, and what were the behaviors that we were going to dissuade and ultimately just not tolerate. So what were our reinforcement mechanisms? And there were so they were embedded in the performance reviews, they were embedded in the management reviews, so our people evaluated their leaders, largely based on demonstration of those core values. Leadership modeling is so critical. And you talk about fire fast. If you have a leader who is not treating the team, treating each other, working with customers, approaching the work the way that you want, you gotta walk the walk, because they're not going to believe the talk. But one of the things we did, we still do. We have a company, even with 4,000 people today, we have a company-wide meeting every week. It's about 25 minutes long. The last segment of that is the player of the week. We've got this internal nomination process when you demonstrate a colleague for a particularly just compelling demonstration of a core value. So we used to do them in person, but now they come on the Zoom. I read the nomination and the story. So we have this example of what good looks like every week that we celebrate. And that was just one of the reinforcement mechanisms, in addition to trying to hire for it, to train for it, to performance review and evaluate on it, right? So it was really intentional, and it was ongoing.
That's fabulous. We do something
Chris,
similar.
can I add one
as well.
more? Just follow
Yeah,
piggyback on
of
that.
course.
So a good mentor of mine, Jonathan Vinokur, who I probably is in the room from Thompson Hind,
I did see
likes to talk about how culture gets activated. And so I think John's heard me say this before. It's the rituals, which are the things that you do, and it's the artifacts, the things that we create inside our company that reminds us of the things and how we should behave, right? So that's all with intentionality, right? So we think about how we activate the culture. That's not how you create the culture, right? You've already went through all that hard work, but the reinforcement of it are those rituals, again, the meetings you have, the core value shout outs you're doing, and then all the artifacts, all the swag. I think if anyone sees Hardick in the room, I need some swag, Hardick. But it's all the things that help us along the way to remind us, right, of the things and how we want to behave.
But it's also the people that you decide to promote that sends a message. It's also the people that you ask to leave. I really feel like I'm making a theme of firing people, and I don't mean to be. But those send a message. I mean, you tell all of your people with those actions what matters and what behavior is what you want.
I had it happened. We had to do it many times with a company of our size, but including some really competent, really capable people. That was a really tough decision. Those are really tough decisions. Ultimately, the right ones. But and that was a very clear. Those were very clear messages across the organization.
Yeah, you can be a genius, the best scientist, or most capable DevOps engineer, super unicorn specialist, but if you're a jerk, it's not going to work, kind of a thing. Yep. It's hard to do, but if you keep that in front of you and remember that your culture matters just as much as everything else, if you want to keep people, making those hard decisions is a big part of being a founder.
All right, thank you. Now for another great topic, we're going to shift our focus to talk about customer acquisition. So Kris, to you first. What do you think are the best practices for developing successful go-to-market strategies, and also the AI topic? So with the sort of more recent announcement of Strawberry, but also what have you seen in AI and product-led growth, and how have they reshaped the go-to-market strategies in the past few years?
That's like a 7-part question. Well, I think that having coached quite a few companies in this moment, it's you have to understand who your ideal client is. And so often in the early stages, we'll sell to anybody because we're trying to get proof and traction to understand how our product's working. But along the way, you have to start to really think about who's the right consumer, who's the right buyer of the software that we're putting into the world. And that moment feels like a really hard discipline, especially for the founders, because they're like, hey, Kris, we have companies in Canada. You do, but that's not who you're targeting, right? Like, you're targeting home remodelers who do blah. So let's go understand that ideal client, the geographic preference they have, right? The social, the demographic, like put all that into play. And then to really just lean into your unique proposition, your 3 uniques, and how you think about coming to market on that. Now, once that's done, right now the hard part is like, let's go build a list. Like the top of the funnel is this enormous list depending upon what business you're building, but AI actually has a great role in that. Like you can prompt AI along the way to help you find all the companies. And that data set used to be really hard. We used to have to pay like discovery.org and those folks like all kinds of money. But now you can actually start to say who my ideal clients are, the geographies I want to find them in, and it will actually bring back, right, like thoughts about how you can go target to those organizations. So I think we were talking earlier before the panel. It's just scaling at ways we haven't seen before.
Yeah. In terms of channel strategies, because you brought it up, Hyland has an incredible channel strategy. Bill, maybe you could talk a little bit about, how you guys approach that, and how you use it to expand your market reach.
Yeah, I think often overlooked part of a go-to-market strategy can be a strategic partner. So it's not you got your direct sales team, maybe you've got your selling partners, you've got your channel, and then you've got a strategic partner that can help introduce your product typically to their customer base. Microsoft became Microsoft. They had that initial relationship with IBM was their strategic partner. Google had that strategic partnership with Apple. Maybe it was 2. It might have been illegal, right? But the default search engine on the Apple device that was able to introduce them and introduce its usage to so many more customers. ChatGPT now has that strategic relationship with Microsoft. They're not necessarily a selling agent. So at Hyland, we and these large, so the larger company, they're always looking for ways. They're established. They're serving thousands of customers. They're always looking for ways to introduce more value to their customers, and it becomes harder to innovate the larger you are. So not only to add more value, but to show that you're bringing innovation to your customers. And a great way to do that is find some smaller company who's got some innovative capability, attach it to yours, API integrations, all of these things, and then you don't have to sell it, but say, hey, you should talk to these guys. It works well with our product. At Hyland, we are really important for us. Sort of initial scaling period was a relationship with a major maker of core banking software. Essentially introduced our product to their customers, and then much later, when we wanted to enter the healthcare space, we crafted a similar kind of relationship with a leading provider of electronic medical records. And you can do that at a very small size. You don't need, you need to demonstrate the viability again of your product. But when we crafted that relationship with that major banking software provider, we were 20 people. Mm-hmm. They were thousands, and we were 20. But we had a viable product that they introduced our customers.
Bill reminds me of one of the most horrifying days of my career when I started at Hyland. Because he interviewed me and he hired me, and I was delighted to have the job. And the large OEM partner of ours, who was responsible for most of our revenue, was the child of our CTO. And when I went and introduced myself to Miguel and said, I'm your new marketing guy, he said, I don't know why we hired you. I don't even know what we're going to need you for. We're going to develop software. We're going to sell through partners. We don't need marketing at all. I walk over to Bill's office and I said, he's like, don't worry, Miguel's got it wrong. We're going to need you guys. But it was a beautiful way to start a business. And to think about it, I'm probably going to say this at some other point, but to have that many more people wake up in the morning thinking about how to sell your stuff that aren't on your payroll is an enormous way to scale. And it worked for us.
Yeah. Good lead into the next question, because it's almost like we planned this. How do you think about transitioning from founder-led sales to sales organizations? And when's the right time, and how do you actually make that transition?
Right. So the first thing I don't think you should do is hire salespeople in your startup. And that probably sounds a little controversial, but I've seen it over and over. Somebody says, we've got a great idea, we've started to get product market fit, we need to go get a salesperson, and we need a good salesperson. And by that, they probably mean someone who's been there, done that, is experienced, probably comes with a bit of a high salary expectation, maybe a decent size equity interest. But they're not really interested in doing what you actually need to do right then, which is get a bunch of people excited to hear the founder tell the story of why there's product market fit, why you should want to get in as an early adopter customer. A good salesperson needs an engine around them to really drive a go-to-market. You'll get there eventually, but I would suggest that in the beginning you hire what I think someone had said, really good doers. I call them 5 tool players. I call them really smart people who are willing to work hard, who will listen to the story, understand how the product works, get the fit, and go out and find people who will get in line to listen to that story. So call them marketing people, call them biz dev people, whatever you, demand gen, they come wear lots of hats. But they need to be somebody who is going to get in there and get dirty on it. And eventually you'll get to, salespeople. And you should. There's no question about it. The thing I will say about scaling and starting to professionalize your go-to-market organization and your sales organization, and we see this generally at the companies we invest in that are now 25 to 50 million, going up to $1 billion in size, there's a tendency, and I know some of this happens when you start a process to add investment to your firm and people sort of hold place, and I get it, but there's a tendency, Julie sort of alluded to this, and we use this expression a lot, bad breath is not better than no breath. And what I mean by that is having 20, 30, 40 salespeople not achieving quota and operating at terrible attainment levels is not better than not having them. Because frankly, the 12% who are making quota and killing it know that those people are sitting around doing nothing. So you've got to fire fast, be fair, but fire fast when people aren't attaining those sales goals. It just kills you on your scale because that money's just sitting there getting used. Whether you could be better to give somebody a bigger patch and a bigger comp plan that is performing than to carry a bunch of people that aren't.
Can I add one thing? Because we keep talking about firing people, and I just don't feel right about it. So
It is part of the thing.
it is part of the thing, but here's the deal. Do it well. Be honest. When you see something you don't like, tell them. They should not know what you're thinking and talking about behind closed doors about them. If your bad employee or your salesperson with bad breath doesn't know it, and then you let them go, that's not what we are talking about up here. You need to be open and upfront the second you see something that's not right. You need to keep reinforcing it. You need to let them know when it's a theme. You need to have the final conversation. And I'm saying these things can happen in a matter of weeks. If this keeps happening, we are going to have to part ways. I mean, quickly, right? That's what we're saying, fire fast, but you have to do it well, and you have to be transparent and honest, and that is hard. That is really hard.
Yeah.
Especially if it's someone you like.
Yeah, I would say that's a great point, Julie. And I would say this. The other thing we see when we see lack of attainment is a lack of a built-out sales enablement capability, which does not mean you have to have 30 people doing sales enablement, but it does mean there needs to be a focused onboarding. Hyland was a great example of this. You went through 6 weeks of training before you're allowed to do anything. So we need focused onboarding. People need to be trained so they can do their job, because then if they don't attain, you've got every basis to say, hey, we've given you a fair shake. You've worked hard. You've tried. We're just not getting there, and well, let's part ways. But if you don't help people attain if you don't get them onboarded and enabled, it's a losing proposition.
Yeah.
John, I'm really sorry I interrupted you.
So talking about sales organization teams, let's open the aperture a little bit, because I think we're hitting on leadership points that I know you guys are all excited to talk about. So Julie, we'll start with you, because you're sort of hitting it a little bit, but I know that you have more thoughts on this. Is like, what do you think the critical leadership qualities are for first-time founders, and what should they be focused on developing early on?
So the questions about leadership qualities. So I'm going to put financial acumen, all of the technical things to the side for a second. So assuming that the makeup's there to be an effective owner, founder, CEO of an organization from a skill set standpoint, the things that stand out to me are, first, self-awareness and humility. So being willing to say and acknowledge what you don't know. Or what you're not good at, because that helps you figure out what you need in your first hires to complement you. And on the humility side, I would say being willing to admit when you're wrong. I've worked with a lot of CEOs that have a hard time doing that. And when you are willing to kind of lay down your sword and say, hey, I messed up, or I would have made a different call if I'd had more information, whatever it is, humility so that people see you're human, is very important. The next thing I'll say is communication, which is so basic, right? Communication. But I'm going to tell you a quick story. So I was the head of HR and operations at an early stage startup. We grew from 4 to 50. Over those 4 years, we ran out of money 6 times. Everyone stayed. And that was because the CEO kept telling everyone we were running out of money. He was able to bring transparently good and bad news to that team. So everyone knew what was going on at all times, even when the news really sucked and was scary. So what I would say to you is, even when you're going through a tough time, letting sort of your team know what's under the cloak and what's going on and why what they're doing matters will really help them feel like they're part of something, and give that feeling of, well, if this is going down, we're going down together. And then when you make it through, and it might not even be that big of a deal, but knowing what's really going on is so important culturally and to retaining people and all the things we're talking about.
Thank you for that story. Bill, I'm sure you have a bunch of other stories too from your time. Can you maybe take us through, what do you think one of your impactful stories were about, your journey?
Well, just in listening to Julie, I think, some of the, oh man, mean, the mistakes I made earlier in my career, probably later too, were not really knowing myself. So, for example, I can work really well with customers and partners when they want win-win too, right? Because I'm someone who really wants to craft a win-win. Customers will buy into that. Lots of them will. Partners will buy into that. We've got very collaborative, long-term relationships. I'm a collaborative kind of person. I'm a pleaser kind of. Where that doesn't work is if I'm in an adversarial kind of negotiation, I'm not going to do well in that negotiation. I'm going to be out negotiate. I'm out of my and there's ones that I've done where I've been, I don't know, too nice or giving them the benefit of the doubt or trying to think, and we got sort of, I got kind of rolled over on some of those, right? I need to bring somebody else in who has different kinds of skill sets than I could bring. The humility one, that strikes me as well. So when I was part of, and I often was, right, the big decisions on enter this market, develop this product, and then it wasn't working. And you're like, well, it should be working. I mean, because this and this and this and this, we've got all the opportunity. Why isn't it right? And you just kind of, you dig in part because you think it should work, but in part because you were, instrumental in putting it into motion. And we waited too long, too many times, market segments, products, maybe sometimes people that I hired, right? Because it took me too long to admit that, well, I was wrong, or I don't know even if it was a good idea, this is not working out well anymore. So those points, humility and knowing thyself, man, so important.
Yeah. Kris, were you going to say something?
Yeah. Coachability.
Of course he was.
Of course. I'm ready to go. By the way, John's got the best socks. Anyways, coachability is by far, I think, for when you meet entrepreneurs and founders, right? Like, how coachable are they really going to be? And there's the local SaaS company that I led a round of funding for, and I was wrong. Like, he is not coachable. He won't listen. We have an incredible board. Trying to help this human, and he can't hear it because he just believes he is right. But his universe is small, right? Like, so my universe is small. Like, I want to be next to Bill. I want to be next to this entire panel and you in the audience to learn. And that's what you need from founders and CEOs is coachability so they can hear it. And one of my favorite quotes is from Doc Rivers. And this quote goes, I'm going to probably mess it up, but it'll go something like this. Average players want to know the score, right? Good players want to be coached, but great players want to know the truth. And in that moment, what a board does for you, what a mentorship does for you, all those folks, they tell you the truth, right? They tell you the truth about where you're at, what you need to do next, the discipline you need to instill in order to get your company from where you're at today to what you set out there to be in 3, 5, 10 years. And the truth is hard. Right? The truth is ugly most of the time for us, right? Like, you're running out of money again, the 6th time, right? Like, but that's the truth. We need that, right? In those moments as founders and visionaries trying to build these companies. And I think that a coachable human, like, and I don't have a great way to do it. I'm still working on, like, how to understand that someone's really going to be coachable in the moment, because you do need that reality distortion field that Steve Jobs had. You need them to believe in a future that's not yet existing, but you need them to be aware of our situation along the way until we get to that future that they believe in. And so coachability for me is key.
Yeah, it reminds me of something. My background is product management, and I think a lot of times what I see with founders is they build something for the market because of the way they see the market, but they also have to have the humility to be able to listen to what the market is telling them and to take it. And I think that's an incredible thing that people need to develop as well. John, I know that you were really excited about answering a question about conflict management, and I thought I could see you. Sure. Bill was going on a tangent, and I thought you were going to jump in there. But how do you think about conflict management, and how do you see the most effective way to handle those in terms of teams and leaders?
Sure, I certainly learned this the hard way, and to Bill's point about sort of know thyself and understand your weaknesses is really important. For me, conflict dealing with conflict, stepping into conflict, thinking about conflict are all things that give me, the sort of, oh, geez, I wish I could do something else, and I'll go find something else to do. And that's the problem. I delay it. And I think that the biggest thing I would say to any founder or any leader, frankly, is that you've got to step into it. And you've got to recognize it, step into it, and work through it. And I had the benefit of going through an amazing 360 program as a leader at Hyland, and that's really when it came clear to me that I was hurting my team, probably my peer group too, because what people mostly want is a resolution to the conflict. Even if they're really angry at each other, they're still hopefully professional and wanting to move something forward. And I have some great examples, and if anybody stays for the happy hour, I'll be glad to share some of them. But step into it, deal with it, build a culture of trust and positive intent, right? That should be a helpful foundation for people to come together in a time of conflict, and then help them work through it. And if they can't get to a place, it's really your job to resolve it. It's your job to say, we're going with A and not B, and I'm sorry if somebody on the side of B is upset, but we'll get you another time, But you've got to move through it. It so slows down organizations, and it grinds things to a halt. But I found that as a leader, I was causing most of that. And as soon as I started stepping into it, even my team reacted like, hey, thanks. We're moving along now. So just get to it.
Julie, anything to add there? I know your day job includes a lot of
Yeah, that's
coaching in this respect.
So what I would say is, you have to step into conflict, just like John said. You can't ignore it. But there are likely, because of your experience level in leading teams or having not led teams, or who knows what you're coming to the table with as a first-time founder, second-time founder, in terms of experience dealing with conflict, it's okay to say to yourself, this is bigger than me, and I don't freaking know how to handle it, and if I try to handle it, I could make it worse. And then go to someone like Bill. Go to someone who's done it a million times over, walk them through it, ask for advice. And I would say mentor, right? But your mentor might not be the right place to go either. Go to someone that you can trust from that standpoint and get some advice. Also, don't be scared if sometimes it's different. If you're not in the conflict and you're seeing conflict between like two team members or a team member and a client or whatever it is, it's okay to say to the parties involved, you know what? I'm not quite sure how I'm going to handle this. I need to think on it. I'm actually going to get some outside advice. Like, you don't have to know everything, but the fact that you're not going to avoid it, even by jumping in and saying, I don't know, but this is going to get handled, I'm coming back to you, is way more impactful than letting it go on and on and on. So it's okay, again, that goes back to humility, saying, this is not my expertise, I am not good at this, but I'm gonna get help.
Yeah. Right. Super great points.
One more question on leadership. Kris, about mentorship. How can founders find the right mentors, and how has your career been impacted by good mentors?
Well, some of us, I think, just get lucky, right? I think I was lucky early on to have a mentor, like the CEO of the company I was working at, like chose me to be mentored. But if you're not that lucky, then you just got to decide, right? You're going to go look for it, and you're going to put that out into the world. You're going to start talking about it, and you're just going to be okay, like as it comes through, to understand that mentorship is a relationship, but it's also with intentionality, right? Like, what's that mean? And be able to have an agreement with the person that you're talking to, like, hey, I want to meet once a month for an hour, right? And in that hour, here's the things I'm working on in myself that I think why you would be a good mentor for me along the way, versus just saying, I'll take anybody, right? I got a pulse, let's go. But I think you can, if you decide with intentionality what your mentorship needs to be because you're working on skills, then I think you can be great at it. And I was coaching a company today. They're about 30 people. They're growing really well. Their head of marketing is young. And I was like, does he have a mentor? Because it's not you in the room. The rest of you all have day jobs and skills. And they're like, absolutely not. I'm like, well, what do we think he needs to know? And they're like, well, these 3 things he doesn't know today. I'm like, well, let's go find a mentor for him, right? Because that will be a person that he can call, because he's going to ask them skill questions that he can't ask the CEO of that company, because that CEO doesn't know it either, right? But they'll be okay with it, and they can grow with it. And I think in that moment, like most people, most of us, and we were talking about this before the panel, most of us are still purpose-driven, right? We're still putting ourselves into the universe, into the workplace, because we want to feel purpose. And mentors, often, and being one myself, like I feel great purpose in helping others in those moments, right? So if you are a mentor, God bless. If you're not, please go do And let's encourage people to go find great mentors so they can just skill themselves up.
That's a great segue into our last question because we're trying to get everyone to the networking event. Julie, what resources in Cleveland or otherwise would you recommend for early stage founders?
Okay, so number one, you need to find yourself a Jonathan Vinokur if you don't have one in your life. He's in the back of the room.
Wait for everyone, Jonathan.
Yeah. Yay, Jonathan. Okay, so you need the resources that know how to do the things you don't know how to do, right? That's all pretty obvious. You need a great attorney and a good employment one. Again, Jonathan's a great one. He's helped me many times. You need the right, CFO, financial resources. You might not know how to do a waterfall chart. You better go find someone who does, because that's the next thing you have to do, right? All those kinds of things. So it's being willing to ask for help for areas you don't have the knowledge. And then I will tell you that there are a number of CEOs that I've worked with that have really enjoyed their Vistage groups. So I thought I've never been in one, but their Vistage groups have been their safe place to take their personal and professional problems that intermingle, because if you're conflict avoidant at work, you probably are at home too. So you things, relationships are blowing up and you might need someone to talk to. So I guess Vistage offers that. And the same with, I think, YPO, Young Presidents Organizations, and I know that there's an EO that does the same thing. So I would highly recommend, and the other thing I'll say is that there's groups, feeder groups. So if your revenue size is of a smaller amount than the minimums, there's feeder groups into those groups. My point is, there's lots of groups you can expose yourself to that have people in it just like you, going through similar things. You get mentors, you get EIRs, you get all sorts of resources in groups like that. And they can be very helpful. And again, I have a couple of CEOs in my network that just swear by both of those. YPO and Vistage.
The only one I would
And Jonathan Vinokur.
So double down on Jonathan. The only one I would add is SaaS Academy. So Dan Martell, SaaS Academy, if you haven't heard of it, there's 700 companies. It's cohort-based. It's super affordable. They have an entry level, and then they have the kind of this executive scenario all the way to the boardroom. It's all SaaS companies. So I was a member of EO for 13 years, but in Cleveland, there's not that many SaaS companies. So if you really want to go find your people, I think that's probably one of my best peer organizations I've seen.
All right. Thank you so much to our panelists for great insights. And if you'd like to connect further with them, we will be out at the networking event. Thank you.
Right on.
Nicely done. Nicely done.